Alright guys, I might go through this kind of quickly. Hopefully you try this one on your own. Hopefully you try to take the average of these two, 90 and 170. So 90 plus 170 is what, 260. Divided by 2 you get 130, which I try to do at somewhat the scale. Y is an obtuse angle. It should be 130. And X you can find from simply subtracting these from 360. So we're still using that same rule. Still applies. So if you add this plus this plus this and subtract from 360, you'll get 40 on that one. So I didn't show any work on here. Hopefully you're showing work on your paper. On any homework assignment, you've got to show some calculations on here of taking an average or subtracting to find values or whatever method you're using. Another way to check this, if this is 40 and this is 60, the vertical angles here should be 50, which would make sense because 130 plus 50 is 180. All right, second one, X is referring to the angle. It's pointing to the angle. Y is this inscribed angle, and you have a 140-degree arc up here. Again, I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. I strongly suggest you pause on each one of these problems and kind of do it on your own. Hopefully you quickly figure out that Y is half of 140, so it must be 70. I'm giving you one more piece of information. Hopefully you realize you need to have this arc over here, otherwise you can't get this one. So if this is 140 and this is 80, add those together, you get 220. Subtract that and you'll find this is also 140. Just coincidentally, this happens to also be 140. And if that's 140, you can find this, which would be half of the intercepted arc. Sorry. So they're both end up being 70 on that one because these end up being 140 because that's an 80-degree arc in between them. All right, got a couple secants on the third one. Try that one out. You have enough information, you might want to pause right there and go for it. If you're not sure what to do, this is one where you subtract the two arcs. So you don't even need this. It's y minus 80 is equal to half of, y minus 80, take half of that, it should be equal to x. And then when you go, wait a minute, Mr. S, you just said I didn't need this. Well, I guess I lied to you. You do need this. If you know this is 80, and this is 160, you can use these two to get that one. So you don't need this. I guess you do need this. You do need this to get y, and you do need this to get y so you can get x. So you definitely want to solve for y first, and then solve for x. Well, that's what happens when you try to talk too quickly. So you add these together. What's that? 240, which means y has to be 120. And if this is 120, this is where you subtract the arcs. So you subtract those two, you get 40. Take half of that to get 20 degrees for angle x. And if you end up with 40, you just forgot to take half at the end, obviously. All right, second set of 3 problems on here. I guess you can only do the one on the left to start with. So if you want to pause and go for it, you may do so. Find these 2 inscribed angles of this triangle. And it's a little tricky on this one. I can tell just by looking at it. It's got some things you got to think about. You know, one thing I'm thinking, maybe if this is 130, you can find this angle here, because it should be half of the 130. If you know this angle and this angle, you can subtract 1 from 180 to get this one. The other thing I notice is this angle down here is across from or intercepting the 130. So this angle is also half of 130. Third relationship is this arc should be double whatever this angle is. So if this is 61, that's 122. If this is 122, it has a relationship with this y. Y should be half of the 122. So y ends up being 61. And if you know this is 65, we said because it's half of the 130. If you know 61 and 65, this is a triangle. You could subtract from 180 to get that one. You could also use the fact that this is a 360-degree circle. 130 plus 122, subtract from 360 at 108, and maybe you'd see a relationship between these two. X has to be half of the 108, or 54 degrees. Again, I hope you pause on these and kind of work at your pace. I'm going to try to zip through these quickly. So here's one where you're going to see a couple like this on the homework where you're not given information directly. I'm sort of giving you a relationship between X and Y, but you got to use these first to get those. So maybe you use 130 and 100 to get these 2 vertical angles. Subtract from 180 to get x, because it's a supplement. So you can probably quickly figure out these are both 115. And if these are 115, I put a question mark for those. You could subtract those to get the adjacent one, or the supplementary on there. So x should be 65. And then you got some thinking to do. This might be easy if you don't think algebraically, if you just think with common sense. 65 degrees should be directly between these two numbers. And you know that this number is 2 more than that one. I might have just given it away. If you try to do it algebraically, you're doing y plus 2 plus y, or y plus 2, which is 2y plus 2. Take the average of those, which means you take half of that, add them up, divide by 2. I'm just going to distribute. I'm doing this algebraically. Simplify that by distributing. You get y plus 1. And of course, you realize y is 64, which would make perfect sense. This is 64. The one up top must be 66, and 65 is right between those two. So I wanted to show it algebraically, but also talk through it kind of logically. Try that last one. There is enough information you can do that, because there's only 2 arcs on that circle. It's a pretty easy one. I'm hoping you can quickly realize, oh, duh. And x has got to be half of the 320. So x is 160. You might work across from this and say, that's 160. This must be 40. And if this angle is 40, then this arc is 80. And that means y has to be 75. Or, oh, did I say that right? Sorry, this is 160. This angle would be 20 degrees, which means the arc is 40, which makes sense because this is 360, 320 plus 40, which means y is 35. Again, I'm rushing through this. So maybe put me on mute for some of this stuff. I don't know. All right. Next set of 3. Hopefully these aren't too bad. A good time to pause once you've got information. I think I've got all I want you to find on there, all the givens on there. I do. Everything is given on there. This is one that, if I'm in class, I typically pause and just let people tinker with this one for a while. People sometimes stumble on this one because they say, oh, there's not enough information. I don't have this arc, and I need to know that arc. You can find that arc quickly, especially when I give you a nice friendly number like that. If this is 260, obviously you can subtract and figure out this is 100. And that's just the start of the problem. Then you've got to do 260 minus the 100 and take half of that. So again, I'll put my question mark on here. This is 100. 260 minus 100 is 160. Take half of that and you get an 80-degree angle for y. Here's one that's a little different. I had you finding the angles before. This is one where you've got to find the average of x and 90 is equal to 75. In other words, x plus 90 divided by 2, or take half of that, is equal to 75. You know, I don't know how you guys would do this. I would multiply both sides by 2 to clear the fraction and say 150 is equal to x plus 90. It's much easier than distributing the fraction. You certainly could distribute the fraction if you wanted to. And then subtract 90 from both sides and you get 60. If you just do it logically, that works as well. 75 is supposed to be right between these two numbers. If you go down from here, this is 15 less, which means this should be 15 less than 75, which of course 60 is 15 less than 75. And the last one, you got a pair of secants on there. So hopefully you're doing subtraction, 80 minus x, and take half of that. Whatever that is should be equal to 35 degrees. And again, I multiplied both sides by 2 to clear the fraction. I like to get rid of fractions immediately. A little tricky here. You subtract the 80, you get negative 10 equal to negative x, which of course means x is positive 10. So hopefully those made sense. I'm going to pause it here before I go to the last part.